Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexx here with another Master Duel video for you. Today we're going to be covering our 60 card Dragon Link deck. Once again, as we covered here at the top of the season here of Season 12. I haven't really had a chance to come back to this deck since the Duelist Cup, honestly. I thought during the Duelist Cup I was going to be playing, honestly, most of these meta decks. I was like kind of trying to figure out like when I was going to work in all these new decks, but it just kind of happened to work out where I was able to play pretty much entirely new decks up until the max level. I played a little Branded Despia and some other random decks here and there before I reached max level in the Duelist Cup, but Dragon Link was actually going to be one of the big decks that I fell back on because I wanted to like, I don't know, I feel like I am getting pretty decently comfortable with playing this deck to a point where like now I don't hesitate nearly as much as I used to when I made plays, but I really was going to use like the Duelist Cup, or the end of it at least, to kind of like solidify that last bit of like truly, I don't want to say mastering the deck, because I don't want to claim to be a master, especially if a deck as complex as Dragon Link, but to at least feel like I have some degree of mastery over it. That said, you know, it's fine that we didn't. I just played it a little bit. I actually ranked up from Plat to Diamond only just recently because of the Duelist Cup and the time I spent playing that. I'm sure that's the case for a lot of people, but I actually did do that with Dragon Link here, so we managed to still get some good gameplay in. Before we talk about the deck here real quick, as always, I just want to remind everyone real quick that I do have a Patreon that I launched relatively recently, a few weeks ago now at this point. You can find a link for it in the description below. If you're looking for some daily Master Duel content beyond what's posted here on YouTube, there's additional daily Master Duel content over on the Patreon. Over there we do video previews, we do exclusive games for Patreon, we do Q&As, we've got some more perks coming up in the near future as well. So be on the lookout for that. It's only $5 a month. It's a lot more value than you get with a pack full of filler that $5 would get you for the entire month. And then honestly, it also just really does make a huge difference in contributing to the production here on the channel. So thank you very much to everyone who's checking that out and to everyone who is subscribed over on Patreon. In any case, 60 card Dragon Link. Yeah, I know before I crafted Grass, I was like, oh, well, I suspect the 40 card variant may be better because it's more consistent. And the 40 card variant is more consistent. There is no denying that. I don't think any one build is necessarily better than the other. I definitely strongly prefer the Grass build, having played both now, though. I think that you do lack some consistency as far as drawing your, like, going second cards or disruption pieces. It's like why we're playing 2 Nibiru, why we're playing 3 Imperm and 2 Valor and Side Frames on top of Maxx and Ashes. Like yeah, there are a lot of disruption tools in this deck, but, you know, of course you're playing 60 cards, and sometimes it can still be a little bit difficult to draw those when needed. So, at the same time, though, it's not been, like, as detrimental as I thought it would be. I thought it would be, like, very, very difficult, nigh impossible to, like, you know, basically go second with a 60-card deck, but that's definitely not true. Like, even if you don't always open Disruption, what Grass lacks in consistency as far as Disruption goes, it more than makes up for in consistency as far as, like, getting your plays going and getting your combos online. Grass can very easily single-handedly get you like all the plays you need to end the game or establish your, you know, your negates on turn 1, depending on whether you're going first or second. So I think the utility that this card provides alone is worth the slight consistency hit, particularly when drawing Disruption. Because again, I don't feel like it really affects consistency too much as far as like your comboing goes, or as far as like your key gameplay pieces, because Dragon Link is already a deck that usually went over 40 cards just to fit all the combo pieces it wanted to play anyway, so like going up to 60 is definitely not that big of an ask for the deck. This particular iteration hasn't changed since we covered it at the beginning of the season, although we are playing a slightly different iteration from seasons past. We've dropped down to 2 Droplet. I might cut these out entirely. I do actually have, and I don't think I've even used this in a deck yet, but I do have 1 random triple tactics talent that I was thinking of trying in this deck, and if I like it, maybe even crafting another 1 or 2 to try for other decks. I've never been like super huge into this card. I think in a best of 1 format, I think this is a better going second card, or not going second. I think it's a better game 2 and 3 card is what I meant to say. That said, it's still got its place in a best of 1 format. It's not like, you know, having your opponent activate a monster effect or your main phase 1 is completely uncommon. And I've seen a lot of decks just kind of like, especially 60 card decks, kind of run a random one here or there. So I've kind of been thinking of trying it. The droplets have like not really been used at all. I don't know if it's not that they haven't been used at all, but they've not been like super duper useful. It's mostly another card to help be a little bit more consistent going second, but the triple tactics talent could easily be slotted in there as well. So that might still happen at some point, who knows. I'm always open to making changes to my builds here. The extra deck I've been loving. I don't see myself, at least with this like iteration of Dragon Link, I don't see myself changing the extra deck pretty much at all. I think for the Thunder Dragon iteration anyway, this is probably just about, in my opinion, the best extra deck you can have. Now, if I was playing the Dragon Maid variant, which I might still try at some point, then I'd have at least one extra slot free here in the extra deck. I've debated long and hard, like, how badly do I want that slot? Like, what would I put into it? I still don't know that I have a concrete answer. It's kind of varied from game to game, right? Like, sometimes I need a more generic Link 2 to go into. Sometimes I feel like I need another more generic level 8 Synchro to go into. Again, it just kind of varies game to game based on what the needs are. That said, I don't know, I still do need to actually try the Dragon Maids, but I have such a hard time letting go of the Thunder Dragon package because the Colossus is so good. Like, this card will single-handedly end games. And the Dragon Maid package just offers more consistency to the plays you already make. From what I understand, I could be wrong about that, but from what I understand looking at the build, it seems like the Dragon Maid package is kind of just meant to add, like, maybe a minor disruption in the form of tiding, and then also just, you know, further accelerating the engine you're already playing. I kind of like going into the side engine of the Thunder Dragons to get out the Colossus, just to have an additional boss monster. Because it's not even just having an additional boss monster to end with in addition to your other ones and your Borrels, but like sometimes you just go into Colossus instead because you might not have that great of a hand, but it's not usually that hard to go into Colossus, and again, this card can single-handedly shut down opponents and win games all by itself. So I'm a huge fan of it. I really like the Thunder Dragon package. I don't see myself wanting to replace it, but I might still try the Dragon Maid package just I don't know, to say that I did mostly. Yeah, I think that's about all that I wanted to talk about the build itself, so let's go ahead and break it down card by card as always, and then we'll take a look at some games. Excuse me, sorry. So we are playing 1 PSY Frame Driver, 2 Effect Veiler, 2 Rokket Synchron, 3 Maxx, 2 PSY Framegear Gamma, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 2 White Dragon Wyverburster, 2 Black Dragon Collapserpent, 1 Fairy Tale Snow, 3 Rokket Tracer, 2 Rokket Recharger, 3 Starliege Seyfert, 3 Thunder Dragondark, 1 Thunder Dragonhawk, 2 Thunder Dragonroar, 2 Absorouter Dragon, 1 Noctovision Dragon, 1 Chaos Dragon Levianeer, 1 Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, 2 Nibiru the Primal Being, 1 Harpie's Feather Duster, 1 Foolish Burial, 3 That Grass Looks Greener, 2 Chaos Space, 1 Dragon Ravine, 1 Boot Sector Launch, 3 Quick Launch, 2 Call by the Grave, 1 Crossout Designator, 2 Forbidden Droplet, and then 3 Infinite Impermanence. That's going to round out the main deck there. Extra deck is going to contain 1 Thunder Dragon Colossus, 1 Borreload Savage Dragon, 1 Chaos Ruler, the Chaotic Magical Dragon, 1 Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, 1 Guard Dragon Pisty, 2 Striker Dragon, 1 Heretic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres, 1 Dragonity Knight Romulus, 1 Dillingerous Dragon, 1 Quad Borel Dragon, 1 Dark the Dark Charmer Galumi, 1 Nightmare Unicorn, 1 Access Code Talker, and then finally 1 Borel Ed Dragon. So there is the build. Now let's take a look at some games. So our first duel of the video here is going to be against Sword Soul Tenyi. It's been a while since I've played against this deck, to be totally honest. It's funny, this deck was very prevalent in the Duelist Cup, but I didn't face it once there. I seriously don't think I played against Sword Soul Tenyi a single time. We're going second. We've got obviously a very good going second hand. We've got both Maxx and Ash Blossom. We also opened the Wyverburster and the Rokket Tracer and the Chaos Space. So like first or second, this would have been a phenomenal hand. But we like to see stuff like this going second, even though like we can't use it right away. I wouldn't want a hand of just like 5 disruption pieces going second because I do have to have some kind of play going into my turn. So this is pretty close to an ideal hand. Anyway, the opponent's going to start off with a Longyan here. I am, of course, going to fire off the Maxx in response because by the time they get their level 10 Synchro out, presumably they're Baron, I'm already going to have gotten 3 draws by that point. And I even drew Nibiru as my first card in case my opponent does decide to go off, so that's nice. But they actually don't go for Baron, they go for the Qixing Longyan here, which is a little bit like, I feel like maybe they should have gone for Baron. This Qixing Longyan is actually going to be pretty annoying for my deck, but I think in a vacuum like this, they should have probably gone for the the Baron. They also flip up an anti-spell fragrance like right away during my draw phase, which isn't a bad play by any means. It's when you would want to activate anti-spell fragrance, but like playing this card in Sword Souls, I mean, they're obviously trying to counter Runic. Like we all know why they're playing this card. Like this is one of those cases where like it's borderline, but on the side of I don't think it's worth it. It's not a narrow tech. Obviously, a lot of decks play spells. That said, though, like it seems like a bit of a win more card. Like it's a win more card against in a lot of matchups. It can kind of single-handedly win you the Runic matchup specifically, but like especially here on like Ranked Ladder, I've not been seeing nearly as many Runics as in the Duelist Festival. I've been seeing them, don't get me wrong, but still not enough that I would play specific tech. That said, the anti-spell fragrance does put in a bit of work here. I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't. As you can see, I just ended up setting 2 Chaos Spaces in Rokket Tracer and passed. Now, it might look like I might have had plays in this hand, but when I really stopped and thought about it, like, what was I going to do here? Normal summon the Tracer, send it for Striker Dragon, add a Boot Sector launch. That actually might have been smart just to set that up now and get it online now to have it for the next turn. And then, like, yeah, I could have potentially summoned a Wyverburster or Collapserpent, but at some point during that, either the Striker Dragon or the Wyverburster / Collapserpent is going to get banished by the Qixing Longyan effect. So it's not really solely the anti-spell fragrance that's messing me up here. Actually, you know, if my opponent just had anti-spell fragrance and then, like, you know, no other disruption, I could go off just fine here. But it's the combination of Qixing Longyan and anti-spell fragrance. It's like, it's not even completely shutting me down, it's just delaying me by a turn, which is a lot. I mean, in Yu-Gi-Oh! Delaying someone by a turn is a lot. It's often the equivalent of shutting them down. So, again, I don't want to, like, dismiss my opponent's play and say it's bad. I don't think my opponent should be playing these cards at all. But anti-spell fragrance is still, like, it's a little narrow. I think it's on the borderline, but I think it's still on the side of, like, a little specific to be playing in a best-of-1 format. So, I wasn't really too worried about losing the game here, though, even though I knew I was going to get, you know, I was going to take some damage, but I only ended up taking 1,000 from the Monk of the Tenyi. It was a little bit risky because we do have to also still play into the Qixing Longyan's effects here as well. We have to be sure that we're mindful about the damage we're going to be taking from that, too. So, drawing the Levianeer and being able to resolve, just being able to resolve this Chaos Space was pretty much all I needed in order to get my plays going, so... well, that and also I needed to bait out the banish from the Qixing Longyan, so that way I could actually, you know, start my plays. So I figured if I summoned a Collapserpent, they'd probably just go ahead and banish it, which they did. Fortunately, I also had the Wyverburster in my hand, so... Alright, now from here, though, things are not looking super duper great during this turn, as far as, like, being able to actually continue to make plays. I'm pretty much just going to have to go into this Dark and then pass. Well, after I set all my spell cards, of course. I did kind of consider just running the Striker Dragon into the Monk, but I wanted a body on my side of the board to take a hit from the Qixing Longyan, because, again, we have to keep the effects in mind. The banishes are, like, not that bad because they don't negate, but they also come with burns. If we had been hit directly by Qixing Longyan, you know, we would have gone to, what is it, 1,700 days. We would have only gotten, like, we would have only been able to special summon one monster and or activate, or rather activate one spell or trap card before it would have been below 1,200 life points, and this card is now threatening to kill us. So even though I do think Baron would have probably been the better turn 1 play in a vacuum, not probably, I think it was a better turn 1 play in the vacuum, this Qixing Longyan is still kind of messing us up, but if I've got this Dark on the field to take the hit, then I can survive, but it's going to kind of be contingent on my opponent not having anything else. That said, the way my opponent's been playing, I really don't suspect they have anything else, you know? Even if they do rip, and this is why I don't really think Anti-Spell Fragrance is, like, the best tech choice for Sword Soul. This is a situation where our opponent very much needs to rip a Sword Soul Emergence to win this game. And they can't do that while their own Anti-Spell Fragrance is in play, so... but anyway, now it's my turn. I can use all my face-down spell cards just fine now. So I'm going to use this Chaos Space in the Absorouter to add a Wyverburster, mostly wanting to add the Rokket Synchron off of the Absorouter there. So, and also get enough materials in grave to banish for the Chaos Dragon Levianeer. I go to summon it and activate. The opponent imperms but does not Qixing Longyan, which I guess, you know, they would have only been able to do... No, they could have done both, actually. They could have done Qixing Longyan's effect and then chained imperm, but... well, regardless here, they decided to just, you know, go ahead and let it resolve, so I'm definitely okay with that. Especially with the Wyverburster now and flipping up the Boot Sector launch. I suspected my opponent was going to activate the Banish effect on the Boot Sector launch. But I have the life points to take the damage, and if they didn't, then that would have been very, very good for me. So now I'm going to normal summon my Rokket Synchron to bring back the Absorouter Dragon, just trying to bait this Qixing Longyan, and I finally do. I finally managed to bait it out. So now I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, what am I going to do from here? And then my opponent concedes, which I thought was kind of interesting. I don't think it would have been difficult at all for me to find lethal in those circumstances, but I wasn't there yet. This happens to me quite a bit, actually, where, like, you know, I've got my opponent on the back foot, right? Like, I've taken the initiative. I have the upper hand now. But I'm still trying to figure out how or if I can end the duel, like, on this turn, and if not, what my strategy moving forward is going to be. And then while I'm in the midst of figuring that out, my opponent just concedes. That happens to me, like, not all the time, but, like, fairly frequently. Multiple times a week, definitely. So, it's why I always tell people, like, be mindful of when you concede. Like, wait for your opponent, make your opponent have lethal on board, and then concede. That's my usual rule. Sometimes I just kind of concede because I want to move on to the next game, sure, but I think generally speaking, you should, like, make your opponent have it, or at least show you. Make your opponent show you the lethal on board before you concede. That's kind of my general philosophy, anyway. So, alright, there's that game. Let's go to jump straight into the next one. Alright, we have yet another game, actually, against Sword Soul Tenyi, so I guess I'm kind of making up for my not playing against any of them in the Duelist Cup by playing, it seems like, exclusively them on Ranked Ladder afterward. That's fine, though. I don't mind that matchup at all. Generally speaking, I don't find Sword Soul Tenyi to be a frustrating deck to play against at all. You know, they're predictable. You know what they're going to try to end on, Xishao plus Baron, so it's never like they're going to surprise you or anything. Anyway, gonna fire off with a Grass right away. Opponent's got an Ash Blossom, but we also opened up Called by the Grave. Opponent's gonna then respond with a Maxx to the Called by. That was definitely an early Maxx. Something to know about this deck, and something you should know about most matchups in general, is when to play Maxx, and it's gonna mostly continge on, like, you know, what your opponent is playing, and if they have any Link 1 monsters is going to be the big one, right? Long story short, I think my opponent should have waited until I normal summoned a dragon for me to play Maxx, because, like, here's the thing, right? The Grass resolves, and I've got a bunch of stuff I can work with here, and, you know, because, like, I'm looking at my graveyard right now, right? They should have at least waited, they should have flipped their toggle to on, waited for the Grass to resolve, and then fired off the Maxx based on what I milled, because, like, here, like, if they hadn't Maxx'd, you know, I'm looking at my hand, I'm looking at my graveyard, I'm like, there's not a whole lot going on, but I have this Fairy Tale Snow, and I can at the very least get a Thunder Dragon Colossus online, and I think that is ultimately what I would have done. Again, had my opponent not Maxx'd, and they would have gotten at least one draw off of the Fairy Tale Snow, so, I don't know, I think it's something I see a lot, in addition to the early scooping, like I always talk about, is the early Maxx's, like I always talk about. I'm going to fire off my Maxx when the opponent activates Fission's effect, thereby ensuring that I get a draw. I'm just not a fan of blind Maxx's either, honestly. But anyway, my opponent then normal summons the Colossus and then passes. I don't know, I guess because I didn't have anything on the field, maybe they thought, maybe their brain thought they were on turn 1. I've definitely done that before, so I would not fault my opponent if they did in fact do that. They had 3k damage here. I don't know, it's kind of debatable, like, if my opponent should have gone for it. I only had 3 cards in hand. So, like, that's like a borderline situation. I don't fault my opponent for not going for it there, but I do think they could have at least put these both in attack mode and hit me for 3k. Anyway, so now it's my turn. I managed to rip another That Grass Looks Greener, but obviously the second one is much worse than the first one, as it's going to do absolutely nothing here. So, going to be relying on my Fairy Tale Snow to get things started, banishing a whole bunch of my cards, including 2 of my Thunder Dragon monsters, in order to make sure that I can get a Colossus out. We didn't actually just top deck the Grass is Greener because we got 1 Maxx draw. We also got that Starliege Seyfert. That's going to go, obviously, a huge way towards winning this duel, but apparently not as huge as Thunder Dragon Colossus. I forgot just how many early concedes. That's right, I remember when I was doing this session thinking, like, wow, I got a lot of early concedes. I feel like my opponents are all just, like, handing me wins. Granted, again, this was a scenario where, like, I was likely to win, but it was right as soon as I put my opponent on the back foot. Like, right as soon as I gained the upper hand, they just conceded. They just folded immediately. Which, again, I was fairly likely to win this game, but I do think it was still a very early concede. Also goes to show how scary Thunder Dragon Colossus can be. Like, in the right scenario and in the right matchup, like, Sword Soul Tenyi isn't even a great matchup for Colossus because they don't do, like, that much searching, but it was still enough to get my opponent to concede here, because in this situation, I was able to address my opponent's board, and if I didn't win this turn, which I was probably going to do. Like, if I didn't win this turn, then I was still able to... stop them from top decking like an emergence to find a play because of the Colossus there. So there's that duel. Let's go ahead and go into the next one. Alright, now we're playing against Branded Despia, and I did happen to notice our opponent is playing 3 Cosmic Cyclone and 3 Eradicator Epidemic Virus, which, alas, are not going to do a whole lot against us, the Dragon Link player. You can make an argument that Eradicator calling spells is still pretty good against us, but we also search a fair amount of our spells and don't rely on hard drawing them, so like, but anyway, I'm going to start off going first here. This hand's a little bit awkward, but mostly fine. I can just Dragon Ravine. I'll pitch the drop what I think is the least useful card in this hand, and then send the Absorouter that I can search Rokket Synchron and try to get that back. Opponent's going to fire off a Maxx here. Definitely annoying, you know, being the Dragon Link deck. So I am going to have to pass here, but before I do, I am actually going to Synchro Summon for my Chaos Ruler. Because if you look at my hand, I actually don't have any form of disruption, and if I'm going to pass into my opponent's turn, I want to have at least some amount of disruption here. So I'm going to try to excavate with Chaos Ruler to try to find something. I do. I find Nibiru, so that's nice. I was looking for Valor or Nibiru there pretty much, were the only real disruption tools I could have grabbed, but I think that was worth it. I think that was worth giving my opponent one extra draw to find it out for myself. That advantage actually evened itself out because, like, yes, I gave my opponent an extra draw, but I also got an extra card, so that's a scenario where I'm fine playing a little bit, and the key is a little bit into Maxx on turn 1. Generally speaking, on turn 1, I would advise playing into Maxx as little as possible, ideally giving your opponent 0 draws, but if you have to give them 1 or 2, maybe if you're ending on a good enough board 3, maybe that's worth it, but above 2, I get really hesitant on turn 1, and I don't think above 3 is pretty much ever worth it on turn 1, so that's just my opinion. Alright, so opponent's going to make a Mirror Jade and smack us with it. They've also got a Despia Theater of the Branded, and they set a couple of cards before adding the Branded in red to their hand. So I'm just going to assume they have a Branded in red face down. That could have been a misclick, but it's better to assume they've already got the out if they didn't immediately add it. So we did get a Starliege Seyfert here off the top of our deck, so that's nice. I'm going to go ahead and summon and activate it, but our opponent's got a Called by the Grave to negate it, so yikes, that's rough. That said, I think, do I still have enough for the Levianeer? Oh yeah, I've got enough for Levianeer here, so I can just go ahead and summon the Chaos Dragon. And then I also get the Thunder Dragonhawk's effect. That'll let me kind of reload my hand, only shuffle some cards back and then maybe get some new ones that'll be a bit more helpful. I am going to summon the Noctovision Dragon though, because it's going to give me an extra body on board and an extra card to draw. Right now, my main focus is just getting more resources, because I know I can't really do anything with the resources I currently have, so I'm just doing everything in my power to find new and or different resources. I'm also not worried about this Guardian Chimera at all, by the way, because remember, Chain Link 1 is my Chaos Dragon Levianeer. I'm just going to use that to destroy their Guardian Chimera, and because it's no longer on the field at the end of the Chain Link, my opponent doesn't get a chance to activate its effect, so the Guardian Chimera I wasn't worried about at all. As soon as they chained it to the Chaos Dragon, I knew. And even if they hadn't chained a Branded Red, the face down one, I was just going to pop it anyway, so they were never going to get the Guardian Chimera off, based on the timing that they activated it. So off of my Thunder Dragonhawk draws, I drew Thunder Dragondark and Chaos Space, which are actually pretty good draws. And namely, Chaos Space plus a life target is a very good draw. That's going to let me top deck the Wyverburster here. On top of that, I also get an additional draw from the Chaos Space. Lest we forget that I'm still going to get another draw off the Noctovision Dragon, in addition to searching out the Boot Sector launch here, which I actually drew a relevant target for, the Rokket Recharger. So, again, right now, my focus is just getting these draws, getting these searches, getting these extra bodies on board, just amassing these resources. Especially because I have the option to attack here. Now I'm looking for a means to make Access Code Talker and just ending this duel. So on that note, I'm just going to go into Dark the Dark Charmer. No need to go into Romulus. Obviously, I already used my, my Dragon Ravine this game. So I'm just going to bring back their Guardian Chimera for some extra damage on board. Then I can Specialist Collapserpent, send that with the Dark in order to make Nightmare Unicorn. Now, my opponent does still have the Mirror Jade effect. They haven't used it yet, so I pretty much figured they were going to use it, in response to the Nightmare Unicorn. And they end up banishing the Nightmare Unicorn, which is the right play. You know, even though it's got the least amount of attack points, it's still a Link 3, so it still represents a Link summon there. It represents a Link summon into an access code, more specifically. So, I have the Boot Sector launch and the Recharger, so I'm definitely not out of plays. I definitely still have a chance of getting lethal here. I'm going to use the Striker Dragon effect to special the recharge, or to add the Recharger rather, and then I get to use the Recharger effect to bring back the Dark Charmer, which is going to be almost exactly, not exactly, but pretty close to exactly enough for lethal there. I was 150 over, but we did manage to find it ultimately, so that really goes to show kind of like why it can pay to get really comfortable with this deck and get used to how open-ended it is, because if you can just, you know, again, my mission there during that turn was specifically just like, my current resources aren't good enough, but I have the means to find more. I just need to find more of those resources, and then I'll be good. And sure enough, we were able to find a lethal. So GG's FM, we've got one more duel to check out. Let's jump straight into it. And this last duel is going to be against a rather interesting Pendulum deck. I don't think it's an FTK deck. I think it's just a Box of Friends deck. Like, it's centered around the Metalfoes and Box of Friends. So, we're going to be taking the second turn here. Our hand's like, it's alright. It's not great, but between Rokket Synchron and Tracer, we do actually have plays, just not very good ones. Anyway, I'm going to summon this Rokket Synchron and go into the Striker Dragon. That'll let me go into the Boot Sector launch. Normally, I don't like to Boot Sector launch before I Dragon Ravine, but in this case, I have to. I'm going to use the Boot Sector in order to special this Rokket Tracer, and I'll use that F to pop the Boot Sector. I'm going to go into the Chaos Dragon Levianeer to try to excavate into some more gas before I go into the Romulus here. This does kind of pose the risk of milling the Ravine, but it's 5 cards off of a 60-card deck. I'm not really worried about it. The opponent, however, has got an Ash Blossom for the Chaos Dragon. Great timing on that, by the way, from my opponent. To not Ash Blossom the Striker Dragon effect to get the Boot Sector launch or the Rokket Tracer effect, was a very good display of restraint on my opponent's part. But thanks to the Striker Dragon getting back Recharger, I'm actually still able to get back a Thunder Dragon monster and then go into Colossus before ending my turn. So, definitely not an ideal ending board, but Colossus plus Chaos Ruler is definitely better than, like, nothing. So, my opponent's gonna, you know, show their strategy pretty much right off the bat here. They start off with a Metalfoes, Pendulum monster, which will have this effect of blowing up one of your face-up cards to set a Metalfoes spell trap in your deck, and then they summon a Box of Friends, which will let them get out some normal monsters, I guess. I don't really know. I mean, obviously they're gonna try to go for some Metalfoes, and I guess some amount of like extra deck shenanigans, but anyway, I want to fire off Maxx directly in response to the effect. My opponent's got an Ash Blossom though. Now, I didn't actually know at the time that this worked, but I was like, I'll try it anyway. I'll just Valor their Box of Friends in response to this, and maybe that'll negate it? I should know that. I should really know that. That's a very basic ruling to know as a competitive player, like, you know, that, Valoring something will prevent them from getting their stuff. And I guess it did because they just conceded right away, so... Yeah, I will admit that that's definitely a ruling I should know, but I'm pretty sure it works with Imperm, I think, which I think is worded the same. I know how to play this game well, I promise you all. I promise I do, but whatever the case, our opponent just ended up conceding. So, like, even though we didn't have, like, the best of hands here, and we're forced to end on a somewhat mediocre board, one, this game was a good show that Thunder Dragon Colossus can help make up for mediocre boards and mediocre turn ones pretty easily. And two, sometimes you don't always need like to end on Borreload plus Borreload. We didn't do that a single time in this video. End turn 1 on Borreload plus Borreload, but as long as you have the right amount of disruption and use it at the right time, then you don't have to end on the perfect board. That can definitely more than make up for it by itself. So that is going to be the end of the games here. Let's go ahead and move now to the outro. Alright, I want to thank you all so very much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That does mean a lot to me, not only personally, but as a means of supporting the channel. I also want to take a moment to thank everybody who, once again, is subscribing, and or at least checking out the Patreon over there. Either way, that means a whole lot to me. And it is a great way to help support the channel as well. But, you know, I'm not in the business of asking for, something for nothing, so, you do also get some more daily Master Duel content over there for subscribing on Patreon as well. Regardless, either way, whether you're subscribed here on YouTube or on Patreon or just watching to the end of the video, as I mentioned, it all adds up and it all means a lot to me. So thank you all very much. I greatly appreciate it. I think that's about all the time that I've got for today's video, though. So without further ado, this is Hexlex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.